The problem that most service providers have is they focus too much on the details of the service they provide.
If you can have that mindset where you really believe in what you offer and how you help people with video, it's like, shoot, I gotta start teaching people this stuff like now.
If you serve people and you are sincere in trying to help them, even if you don't make a sell, it's good for you.
On this episode, you're going to discover the power of live webinars and how to tailor your content to resonate with your target audience. You're also going to walk away understanding the importance of adopting a service mindset in business. I'm really excited about this episode. Glad you're here. Let's get into it. What is up, friend? I'm Ryan Coral from Studio Sherpas, and this is the Grow Your Video Business show. This is a show that I designed a long time ago to help people that want to build a more sustainable video production business. So we take all the things that I've learned over the past 19 years running a video production brand, started doing a little bit of everything, then got into wedding films for a whole bunch of years, and then transitioned about a little over a decade ago into corporate storytelling, documentary style videos, and have built an amazing community of filmmaker friends from around the world. And we're here to sharpen each other, to learn from each other. I've made it my mission to continue to learn how to build a better business, how to build something that I would like to be able to sell one day. And that's what I want for you, to have the freedom. Maybe you don't want to sell your business, or maybe you don't want to pass it on to a family member, but to have that option to be able to have choices with your business. That's really what I want for you. And I think in these episodes that's what we're trying to design, is content that can help you make better decisions, make you learn faster, make you work smarter, not harder. And speaking of working smarter, not harder, we have a resource that is all about AI. I've been using ChatGPT and a few other softwares over the past few months that have really sped up my workflow in a lot of different areas. And I'm not sure where you're at with the AI stuff, but if you're not considering it, man, at least download this document and take a look at some of the softwares and like how people are using AI to speed up workflows for stuff like, editing, planning shoots, and also sales and marketing, lead magnets and funnels, and all the things that you need in order to build a more predictable business. So you can get access to this document. It's totally free. I've built it for you to have. Just go to studiosherpas.com/AI and you can access it immediately. studiosherpas.com/AI. With that, let's get into today's episode.
What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to another episode. Today, I have with me Jason Fladlien, who is the co-founder of Rapid Crush. Jason, I know it's probably warmer in California than it here is in Michigan, but I'm so happy to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I grew up in Iowa, so I know that weather very well over there.
Oh, yes. It's been unusually warm the past few days, but it's going to get regularly cold pretty soon, so I can't wait for that. The leaves do look pretty, though, so we do get that. Jason, tell me a little bit about the work that you do at Rapid Crush. What is that, and what kind of difference are you guys making there?
Yeah, so we try to help people either start a business online or grow a business online, and I've been doing that even predating the company I have now since 2007. We've been able to reach 131 countries and 150,000 paying customers, and have either directly or with partnerships have sold over $250 million worth of stuff over the last 15 years, and it's been a hell of a journey.
Wow. Did you sell most of that stuff in like 2020 and 2021?
No, I did well then because we were virtual, and a lot of people, webinars were my jam. That's what I'm most known for. Yeah. So Zoom had brought me in right before they IPO'd. So we actually trained Zoom's user base on how to better and more effectively use webinars. So when everybody went to Zoom, when we were training with Zoom, nobody other than industry insiders knew what they were. And then my kids were now doing Zoom on school and having Zoom birthday parties afterwards. So we certainly benefited from that. But some of the best campaigns that I ever put in place were even predate that by 5 or 6 years. I feel old saying that.
Right? Oh my gosh. Well, here's a question. I mean, do you feel like once 2020 came around, we've all spent so much more time on video. People that would have never said, people that hated the idea of showing up on video. Pretty much everybody has done that since then. Do you think, with the data that you have, our webinars, do people still register for them, watch them, watch the replays? Like how is that looking after all of this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I went through several cycles of that, and we'll define a webinar here very quickly because most people still don't know what they are. A webinar is short for an online seminar, very creative way. They just mash two words together. It should extend far beyond that now, but in most instances, what a webinar looks like is it either makes a sell or it advances a sell forward. The benefit of a webinar is that it reaches many people at the same time as opposed to one person at a time. And so there's a lot of efficiency there. So if you're in a situation where a presentation, you at your very best, so if I could capture you, the very best version of you in your business that could communicate the best insights to your best clients, what would that look like? That's essentially what the presentation portion of the webinar is. And then the offer at the end is either, hey, buy this thing, or, hire me for this service, or take a step closer to do some sort of discovery on if it makes sense for you to buy this thing or hire this person. And that's what a webinar looks like. Webinar had their heyday. Every industry, every new technology that hits will have its halo effect day, where you could be an idiot, you could not know what you're doing, you could have lukewarm value at best, and it could be very useful for you. And the webinars had that. They had that mainly way back in about 2014. There was a little bit of resurgence in it in like 2020, 2021. But that golden era is over. Now, here's the good news, though. That golden era was for a market that was this big, tiny, right? The market is this big right now. So webinars for us in the industries that we work in are still the highest leverage point of what we can use to scale as quickly as we can with the least amount of resources available. And that's why I like them. I like them because it solves two problems that are hard to solve. The problems are we either educate people or we sell them, but it's very hard to do both. So if you go on watch YouTube videos, and if anybody puts a sales pitch in a YouTube video, they practically get crucified. They get ratioed. Nobody wants that, right? So what YouTube users want is for you to give your life and soul and spend 80 hours a week on a video that makes you nothing, that they can consume for free. So nobody who wants content wants to be sold. And now when you sell, if you use content, it typically gets in the way. So like Budweiser doesn't advertise their beer and talk about the process of distillation. They put bikini-cladded babes on a beach playing volleyball. So it's like you either educate or you sell, but it's hard to do both. Most advertising has no value to it because it's all pitch, pitch, pitch. So I like the webinars because it combines two things that are normally not connected together. You either advertise and annoy and then hope to make up for it with whatever product you sell them, or you fulfill some sort of thing of value, but you don't make any money directly from it. You hope it somehow comes back to you later or hopefully sooner. I thought the webinar was great because we could simultaneously educate and sell in one sitting. And if we do it right, the education portion is so valuable that regardless of whether they buy or not, they buy you in the concept of I want to come back and I want to learn more of those things. And so once you master that, then it becomes multifaceted in its value. Now I can take that same idea and apply it in shorter form media. I can take that idea and just do content. I've done keynote speeches that have had standing ovations, Ryan, where I just chopped the pitch off of my webinar and just did the content portion of it. I see the value in them. But if people are looking for, hey, let me get a lottery ticket, this ain't it. And I hate to tell you, nothing in business is.
What are you talking about? Of course, there's got to be.
Everybody thinks the challenge model, that was the evolution of the webinar model. We'll just run challenges now. And once you trick people for a while, you can get a temporary benefit from that. But my number one clients that come to me now are, Jason, I can't make my challenges work like they used to. I need help. I need a webinar. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay. Cool. We'll do it. Podcasts are also very popular, but they're not maybe they're past the heyday of where they were before. And it just goes on and on. It's the circle of life. So if you can get an advantage, I urge all of you, if you have the benefit of getting in early where you can be mediocre and get an excellent result, please do that. But know that when it's raining money, it stops raining after a period of time. And if you don't have anything that can sustain itself in terms of something that's so valuable, it transcends the media, you got major problems, my friend. I've met too many temporary millionaires in this business, Ryan. So we want it to be a function of something greater, something that is sustainable, that the more you do it, the more valuable it becomes.
Yeah, that's good. Do you think that is there value, or maybe compared to a live webinar? Is it even worth having an evergreen webinar with this model?
I don't think so. There are edge cases, but 9 times out of 10, anything that can be evergreened just tends to make more sense not to be. There are certain valuable things that a live webinar can do that can't be replaced. And if you're worried about, limit of your time, you can have other people do it for you live. And in some instances, that makes more sense. But I always think in terms of conversations, not presentations. So I want to have a conversation with an audience, and nobody wants to watch the recording of the Super Bowl the day after it happens. They want to be part of the experience of it. So you lose a lot when you do that. And the greatest lessons I've ever learned in my career in business, Ryan, and we'll apply them on this podcast, is when I am out of slides on a webinar and I still have hundreds, or in some occasions thousands of people connected, and they still have questions. And these are questions related to, hey, I want to invest in what you're showing me, but I'm not sure if I should. And sometimes we will spend 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 hours after the formal part of the presentation is done, hanging in there with the audiences. And the greatest breakthroughs I ever understood about my market segments that I work for are in those 2 to 3 hours after the formal part of the presentation is over, where I really get to understand what I call the heartbeat of the market. And I really get to understand how people think, what their limits are and what their perceived limits are, what the mistakes that they get stuck in that could cause them to not be able to grow. And I've increased my ability to coach and to consult based upon that experience. And my empathy for my market of who I serve is massively increased. So to such a depth of a degree that I can now, when I work with clients, I don't have to say a word to them. They understand that I know them. I don't know how they do, but they just do. And that leverage you gain in your business is so valuable. So even if it's hard to justify directly to do, certain things live, like the indirect benefits you get from them are just so hard for me to want to give up. So here we are. We're still out there, still doing it after all these years.
That's awesome. And I agree. I think the evergreen, if that's the only option, sure, it's an option. But to be able to interact live, get live feedback, the people that are listening, they're going to be incredibly engaged, and then to be able to get answer or questions answered. I mean, you if you can get people onto a webinar and you're answering questions, like, people are looking at you as the expert, and that's amazing because they're not on somebody else's webinar asking questions; they're on yours, right?
Yeah. If I can answer your question, Ryan, and it's similar to his question over there, but he's afraid to ask it, and you ask it for him. And because I'm not talking directly at him, he can take it in a different way than if I was directly addressing him. There's so much leverage in that alone. So if 7 people ask 7 slightly different versions of the same question and you answer it in 7 slightly different ways, that gives so much more dimension into how somebody can make a decision. It's so valuable. And people discount that. They think way too linear in their business, which is frustrating to me, trying to help people make more money. But nonetheless, that's how people make that decision. And so I find the best buyers that I get on webinars are the ones that don't even ask the questions, but they sit there and they listen to me answer questions. And it's after the 7th or 8th or 9th time that I answer it from a slightly different perspective. It gives them the holistic view of it. Alls I want, Ryan, and this is what everybody should want. I just want the right people to buy my stuff, and I want the wrong people to not buy my stuff. That's all I want.
100%.
But if I sit and I design something that I have you in mind for specifically and exactly, because I know maybe I can't help everybody else, but you, oh my God, it'd have to be the worst unfortunate series of events if I can't help you. You're who I designed it for, and you're not buying, right? That's a problem for me. I got to help you realize that. Does it really make sense for you not to buy, or does it make more sense for you to buy? And so that's how I look at that. We're just trying to figure out that if you're the right person, it's going to cost you more not to buy. And if you're the wrong person, I never want you to buy. And that's kind of the frame that we approach it in. So if you can approach more interactions in business like that, I think you're going to find you're going to make a hell of a lot more money.
That's really good. Yeah, I say that all the time. My buddy Jim, he's the one who kind of taught me. He's like, you want to get a no as soon as possible. You want to, however that goes about, whether it's on a discovery call or somebody going to your website and realizing almost immediately, like, oh, you're not a good fit. Like, the sooner that happens, man, you're saving them time, you're saving yourself time, and getting them closer to finding the ideal client. I don't want to work with clients that don't get us, don't trust us, don't, they're just not, they just don't fit the vibe. Like, we're going after people that can appreciate our sarcasm, our goofiness, but also our seriousness and, what we bring to the space. But if people can't appreciate that, like, it's just not gonna feel good for anybody, especially me.
That's right. That's right.
So let's our audience, and when I say our audience, I mean, I'm like pointing at me, video business owner. Mm-hmm. I've got recently a good friend of mine is an executive creative director at an agency where they work mostly with manufacturing clients. And we're talking through what kind of video packages can we put together that would, because every manufacturing company wants a brand film. They want this brand anthem piece that kind of says who they are, what they do, why they care, that sort of. And we're like, well, and what would be great is if they could have a piece that would be good for their HR, for recruiting new talent. And those pieces don't need to be like super different. They could be like, tweaked a little bit here, there. So we're thinking through some different packages, video packages that are turnkey, just to simplify the whole process. Yep. Well, let's say we come up with we have these packages. The way that we work normally, discovery call, try to answer as many questions and really figure out, like, would this service, these packages, would these make sense? Would these help you, get more clients? Would they help you get better employees? And if somebody is ready to move forward and they want to do this brand anthem piece, then we'll do a workshop. We'll spend a couple hours with all the stakeholders of this project, kind of start with the end in mind, go through a lot of questions to really figure out who they are. And then we've got our storytelling process that we go through. We create this blueprint, and then we have a guide that will help our team. It will help get alignment with their team. And so everybody's on the same page before we hit record. So that's kind of the flow. Then we start production, we start shooting, editing, and then we deliver the stuff. If that's like our go-to market strategy for what we provide, how can I use a webinar? Like, what ways should I be using a webinar that's for that audience? Are you already seeing like red flags? Like, oh, dude, like you've already got some problems before we even start here.
Yeah, I don't think a webinar makes sense in that situation. I'm not saying we wouldn't, but that wouldn't be the first place I would move. We have a hierarchy of different problems we're trying to solve for first. So a webinar as a media is the delivery of the message to the audience. So every really successful marketing campaign has three components. They have an audience, they have an offer, and they have a message. So we've heard the offer. You've explained it to me, and we've heard the audience. So then the idea is the messaging of how we would message the offer to the audience. A webinar is a thing that we look at, but before I'd even go there, the first thing I look at is the audience. So this is a useful exercise for everybody to practice. If I could only sell to 5% of the market and I had to make all my livelihood off of just 5%, who would the 5% be? Who would I eliminate? Who would I turn my back on? And who would I never, ever waste my time on again if I could only serve a small portion of this overall larger market? So we start looking and asking questions. Out of every client or potential client that you could prospect, are there certain types of clients that are disproportionately higher in terms of profitability? That's a variable I want to know. Every market has this, where 20% of the market spends 80% of its dollars. So I want to figure out who that 20% is as fast as I possibly can. So that's the first thing. The second factor is the time decay. So some people make decisions faster than others. So not only is there high profitability in terms of the revenue that this particular client could take in versus that particular client, but then there's that cycle. How long does it take to get this client on average to make a decision for this type of offer? And so I'm trying to find initially the clients that are the highest value for the least amount of time, both on before the sell and then on the fulfillment after the sell. Because there's problem clients that sometimes the most expensive clients you get are the ones that pay you money. So you want to make sure that after they pay you money, that the resources, they're not draining from you either. So we want to figure these out before we even consider anything else. And then this informs the offer. Because an offer slightly tweaked to point at a very specific audience can have multiples in return. The joke I always give is, a regular old journal, you sell it for $10 on Amazon. But if you make it an anniversary journal or a baby's first step journal or a travel journal, now you sell it for $30 or $40. It's still blank paper on the inside of the journal. The paper price doesn't go up 4 times. The cover doesn't cost 4 times more to create, but you can sell it for 4 times more because it's slightly altered and pointed at a very specific audience. And so it stands out, it gets that audience's attention more, and the audience is more likely to respond to it, and they're more likely to get a result from it, which is also obviously very important. The joke I always give is like I have a German Shepherd, and if I'm not sure what to buy, and I'm looking at all these different options on the shelf, and one of them has a picture of a German Shepherd on it, I buy that one. Well, I have a German Shepherd. This has a German Shepherd on the cover of it, so if I don't know what else to do, I'm gonna go with that. So you want that with your offers. Here's what it also does for you, because if everybody is making typically the same type of offer, I do not want to make that offer, even if there is no objective in marketing. It's all subjective. So if it was at one point in time objective and then everybody started doing it, it is no longer as effective as it used to be because it's homogenized. So if I want to get innovative, I have to get innovative if I want to create a breakthrough. So I want to slightly reconfigure the offer in a way that's unique. And so it stands out to get attention, but it's also unique in terms of its value to that particular specific audience. It does something tailor-made to that audience that nobody else does, that audience would understand and appreciate and be eager to own. So these are what we're looking for before we do anything else. And then we have to field test it. So we make hypotheses in business, and oftentimes we are wrong, just like scientists are. We are wrong probably more than we're right. And if you're not wrong more than you're right, then you're not trying hard enough.
Great, yes.
So we want to take calculated risks. So now the question becomes, how can I test this out in a way that takes minimum amount of effort, time, energy, and money on my part? That if I can test it out small, then I can win it big. But if it doesn't work, then I just next it. And so, designing and building a whole webinar is the last thing I want to do, because something like that can take 50 to 100 hours in some instances, depending on how you're going about it. So I kind of want to have such a high probability of knowing that it'll work before I create a webinar. That's where I'm trying to solve for that. So I would just go out and start showing it to people and seeing if I can get any traction, seeing if I can get anything as a different response to what I'm currently getting right now. And I want to postmortem every interaction. So what that looks like is, I form a hypothesis, I try it out, and then I observe what happened, and then I adjust. So attempt, observe, adjust. That's my mantra. Attempt, observe, adjust. Attempt, observe, adjust. I look at it like a spiral that continues to get up. So if up here is where the money's at, and down here, you make some progress forward, but then you fall back. But then you make some progress forward, then you fall back. So each time the fall back is less than the progress made. Right. So you're failing your way upward. You're in the spiral, though. It's not a straight line. So you're spiraling your way up there. So I'm going to try this with a client. What did we learn? What could we do better? What can we invest in the next interaction? Then we go back and then we try it again. And that's kind of the approach that I have. Now, say you notice patterns and say you see things that occur over and over again. And now it becomes time to consider doing more mass media style marketing. because now you can talk to groups of people, but at the same time make it feel like you're speaking to each individual. And then if that works, then you got to test off the next hypothesis. Will a person like this show up and attend a webinar? Certain markets, they're more likely to attend than other markets. Now, here's the calibration on this, Ryan, because I see clients lose millions of dollars because they make this fatal mistake. I had a client just last week. She says, "Hey, Jason, I got 11 people on my webinar. It feels terrible." I'm like, "Okay, what's the cost of the ticket you're selling?" She's like, "It's $25,000. I said, "How many of them bought?" She says, 4. I'm like, "Well, you're closing at 50% almost, 40%. Right. That's pretty damn good." I'm like, "We can improve it maybe, but we don't have to." Second of all, if I'm doing my math correctly, you just made $100,000, at least in revenue. Yeah. She's like, "Yeah, I did. You're right." I'm like, "Cool. I hope you get 11 people on your next webinar."
Yeah.
Because she's in a professional environment with decision makers who don't have a lot of free time, and they're not used to consuming media like that. It's not a market where there's a lot of webinars happening, but it doesn't matter when you do the numbers. Because I also asked her, I said, "Is there anything else in your business right now that is that cost efficient?" And she goes, "No." I said, "Great. Yeah. So don't give it up." There are other things we could certainly do, and we should poke and prod, but let's not beat ourselves up. What happens was she was beating herself up. And then right fitting it to the situation, I think, is very important, Ryan. So that is like the briefest answer that I could give to that very complicated, nuanced scenario that you just described.
That's good. Yeah, I love how you position that, because there is this belief that, man, if I don't have X amount of followers, until I can get the blue check, it's like, well, now the blue check is a little different story these days, but to think that, if you've got 11 potential buyers in a room and you're able to close any of them, that's amazing, right? Yeah. It's like, how many do you actually need? And for a lot of us, we haven't done the math, but when we start, stepping backward and start looking at it, well, how many, if I did do a webinar and I did one per month, what would make this worth my time? And if you just said, every other webinar you booked a client like that, geez, oh, Pete, that's 6 new clients just on, let's just say 12 hours of work doing the actual webinar. That's like amazing. That's like an incredible ratio. And I think people would be surprised that, wow, I never thought to sell video services, somehow weaving that into a webinar, that could be a thing.
I certainly, I'm excited to go into industries when they're buying in other ways that are done where it doesn't have to be so hands-on, because then we could probably put a webinar in there.
Well, okay, so let's just say, I'm working with this creative director. He kind of paints, he knows the pain points, and he knows that all of his clients would want video, but because everybody does a brand film different, the process, it's going to take us this long, and it's hard for me to quote because I'm not really sure what you need and what's the budget and all these things. So for him, he's like, okay, let's dial in these different packages. There may be things that we need to educate because maybe they don't want to be on camera, or maybe they just think that, if they do that, it's going to make them seem too trendy, or that's not really their brand or whatever. At what point would you say, okay, now you're ready to, Ryan, Tell Studios production company, you guys should have a webinar. You should be, it's going to be geared toward manufacturing, this much money, this region. They've got these same problems, right? They don't have a piece that differentiates themselves. They don't have a piece that really communicates their culture. So every time they're hiring new people, it's a crapshoot, and people aren't aligned with their values. 50% of them aren't. So if they can, speed up their hiring process with the right employees, and then also be connecting with ideal clients, how can video help them do that? I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, well, I know, these 3 videos, this brand film, this, culture piece, that's going to be really helpful. And then, these 10 or 12 social pieces, if somebody has those, they're really going to be able to communicate their differentiator, and hiring should become a lot easier, and sales and marketing should become a lot easier. So if that's a setup, what else am I missing? And then at what point can I start going online to say okay, next month I'm hosting a webinar for marketing directors that work for these kind of manufacturing companies that have
I
these
think
problems.
you should probably do it sooner than most people would guess. So the idea is, hey, we've proven that this works when I'm out there doing it one-to-one, or we've proven that it works when I'm networking or however else I get customers. I'm of the attitude I would do it even if I didn't have customers for the experience, because it forces and disciplines you to sit down and communicate it in their language, not your language. It forces you, if you're doing this right, to walk through the problems that they experience. The problem that most service providers have is they focus too much on the details of the service they provide. Decision makers typically, they don't care how the watch is made. They want to just know what time it is. And that's something I think everybody who's in any services at all should take to heart. What do businesses want? Businesses want to make more money by getting more customers, and they want to do it while continuing to enhance their brand. So it's less important to them to know the specifics of the video production side of things. It's less important to know the mechanics. It's more important for them to understand, hey, did you know that if you don't have the right video, hiring becomes so much more expensive and it becomes so much harder to get the right person? Really? They're like, I didn't know that, because hiring people is a huge problem to them. They sit up at night and they wonder, man, how do we get good talent and how do we retain them? They don't sit up at night and think, man, I need to have a cool video.
Right.
They just don't. If they did, they would be hunting you down. You wouldn't have a problem. Right. You'd have people knocking on your doors trying to figure out how to do business with you. And so you're framing it, and I know you're a pro at this, Ryan, because you're already framing it in terms that they're most understood. But if you sat down and thought, okay, how can I show them that if they don't understand the outcome of what these videos can provide to them, how this is harmful and dangerous to their business, and how this thing is something that they probably don't consider. So they are blind, fumbling for a light switch. They don't even realize that this is an important thing. They're stuck over here. I have the answer to unstick them, but they don't even know where to look to get the answer. So it's my duty to provide it to them. But I have to do it in their language, right? So whoever the key decision maker is, I want to know everything, not just related to my service, but everything big and small that's a problem in their life and what's holding them back and what they're looking to get, where they're looking to gain and what's holding them back. And then I'm going to, if it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to sell something that isn't true. But as long as it makes sense, I'm going to then align my solution to the problems that they face in a way that makes sense to them. I'm not going to force them to try to understand what I do. I'm going to understand what they do and then put it in those terms. And then if I do all of that, it's largely inconsequential on the specifics, other than as long as they're not sticking points, right? So if somebody's like, yeah, okay, now I understand that video is important, but I'm just worried that if I hire you guys, it's going to take forever. It's going to pull resources. I got these people out here. I don't want them shooting video. I want them out there making me some money, right? So then you just have to ease those concerns and explain how the process works, not because they're interested in knowing how you make your sausage, but how the process works vis-a-vis how it impacts the 762 other issues in their life that they're simultaneously facing. And so if you go through that and you write a webinar and then you just throw it away and never use it, it will probably be super valuable to you, because it will change completely the perspective in which you look at future clients and how you interact with them and where you go to solve problems. But I would also just have an open conversation. Hey, look, and I'm creating this webinar specifically for you because here's how I believe that this webinar is going to help you. And then you lay them out. I think it's going to help you in the following ways. And so my goal is on this webinar, when you attend, for you to understand that these are secret levers that could help you that you're probably not aware of and that you didn't even know existed. And I'm going to help show you how these things can help you. Now, whether or not we end up doing business is inconsequential. I'm just going to help you because I feel it's my duty, because I can see that I can help you. If you can easily rescue somebody who's drowning and you don't, is that okay? I mean, that's not the conversation. That's an aside between you and I. That's a philosophical pondering, right, Ryan? It's like, philosophically speaking, if you're walking by ready to go have lunch and you see somebody drowning in the fountain, you don't say, I might get my shoes wet. I'm not going to save them. You reach in there and you grab them. So that's kind of the attitude we have, right? So the frame of the webinar is like, I believe that these things are so critical, important to you that I'm going to show them to you. Now, my hope is that you might consider doing business with me as a result, if and only if it makes sense. But regardless, whether you do business with me at the end or not, I feel like it's so easy for me to help you in these ways to understand these things that I'm going to do it. And hopefully you show up and see it as well. Because I think if you do, it'll be worth your time. And so you can start the conversation there, and it literally can just be like, here are the 7 areas in which you're limited until you have blank. So blank would be not necessarily my video package, but it would be until you have, something that best represents your brand in a media that's easy for your customers to consume or something like that. I don't know. Again, I don't know the specifics of the industry so much, Ryan, but hopefully everybody's seeing what I'm saying there. And so then they can get the conclusion, oh my God, this is important. This is how it would work. And then should I use video or should I do something else? And they're gonna naturally make the conclusion, well, something else is out there and I have to go find it. Video's right here and I could just get it. And then you can move the sale forward. But that's kind of the opening that I would try that out and just see what would happen. If you serve people and you are sincere in trying to help them, even if you don't make a sale, it's good for you. There's no losing in that scenario. The only losing is to not begin to even try it in the first place. It's not like it will harm you. There are certain marketing out there that if you try it and it doesn't work, it has a negative effect on your brand, right? This isn't one of those cases because it starts with service. And if the service is correct, it can lead to sales. And most often what will happen is you're close but not on the mark. And they say, cool, now I make an adjustment, and then I try it again.
Oh, man, so much of that I love. I think I love even thinking through, like, what are the what are the objections that our ideal client would have, and trying to think through all of those. What are those roadblocks? What are the hard questions that we're going to get asked? And then answering those, like taking the time to answering those, building out, the myths or the reasons why people don't, and then talking about, like, what happens if you did? Like, what can you get? How much time could you gain back, or how much money could you make? Like all of those things. Like, as a video guy, I didn't get into this work thinking about these questions. I got into this work because I got a cool opportunity to shoot this video for this cool client in this cool place. And then we did another one. And then, and then we do this for a couple of years. And it's like, oh my gosh, like people are actually, and they're paying us more money. And now we've got better gear, and now I've got more liabilities. And now I need to charge more. And then you learn as you go. But most of us can't afford to take the time, or we just don't even know what to do if we did have the time to look inward and say, like, okay, well, what are the common threads with the people that are hiring us? And do we want to do more work with them, or is there a different industry that we resonate with more? And if there is, like, what kind of questions, what kind of problems do they have? And asking those. So I love what you're saying, that if the only thing that you did was like plan out the guts of the kind of webinar that you're suggesting, man, you're going to have a really powerful message when you do hop on a discovery call, or when you are at a networking event, or when you're asked to speak at an event to your ideal client. Like that's the work that we should all be doing. Really, really like that. That's powerful. Nice. So practically speaking, as a creative, and I know this world all too well, I just got off a coaching call with one of my students, and we just get in our head, and we want everything to be perfect before we do the thing. And one of my favorite sayings that years ago I started actually applying was, you don't learn until you launch, until you actually do the thing, until you do your first webinar. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So a lot of people will get caught up in when I say a lot of people, my hand is totally raised. A lot of people will get caught up in, well, what should my slides look like?
Yeah.
Or what software, should I do Zoom? Should I do Riverside? Right. Like, should I, do YouTube Live? Like, what's the thing? And then, we come up with all of these, and there's a lot of, if you did all the things required to do a webinar perfectly from beginning to end, marketing it to delivery and follow-up emails and all the things, it's 100 hours, right? Or more.
Easily more, yeah.
So what I would love is for people to listen to this chat, to walk away from this
feeling like, you know what, I don't know my market perfectly. I've got some good ideas. Let me start outlining this. And then for those that are like, no, I feel like I've spoken on stage and I kind of get it. I've never packaged it in a video or a webinar experience. How can you help us get out of our head and just launch the stinking thing so that we can at least start testing the market and see if we should tweak it, never do it again, make some changes, make major changes? Like, how can you help us?
I love that question. So say you wanted to start karate. You wanted to get really good at karate. And so you go into the dojo. I would hope that your first lesson wouldn't be, let me spar with the black belt. Now, unfortunately, you're going to be with a bunch of 7 and 8-year-old kids, and you're going to be doing some basic karate. That's where you're going to start. And you have to humble yourself to start there if you want to progress. If you want to go straight to the black belt, you're going to get a bloody nose. And so, in this metaphor, I am the black belt in this instance. So how I approach them these days is not how I recommend you would approach them. And it wasn't how I approached them when I started. Yeah. So, should I use slides or not? My question is, do you like slides? Are you comfortable with them? Would it be easy for you to use them? If the answer is yes, then we use slides. If the answer is no, then we don't use slides. If you say, Jason, I'm really comfortable speaking extemporaneously, just give me a rough outline and I'm good to go, then there's your answer. If you say, Jason, I couldn't do that to save my life, then maybe we break out a whole outline and we have detailed notes and you show them the notes and you just go through them. The first webinar I ever did was on a mind map. And I basically had like 4 points I wanted to make. Each of those 4 points had 4 subpoints. Really easy to do, right? It was not very creative for being a creative. So I was like, okay, the 4 core elements. And I'm like, each 4 elements has 4 things that support it. So my whole content portion of my webinar was, hey, when it comes to X, these are the 4 things that matter more than anything else to get this outcome. So let's look at the 4 things. Here's the first thing. Here's what you need to know about this first thing. You need to know these 4 things. Here's the second thing. You need to know these 4 things. And that was like 45 to 60 minutes of content right there. And then when I transitioned, I said, now that you know these 4 things, there are 2 options for you. You can go and apply them on your own and get whatever result you get. Or option number 2 is we can work together and I can help you apply them. If we were to work together, this is what it would look like. And then I laid it out. I said, I'd be able to provide this for you. You'd get access to this. You would have this type of community support. Here's the investment that it would cost if you were to join this. Now, here's the risk you would take, and here's how we can mitigate that risk as much as possible. And if that makes sense to you, go here and sign up. And we start at this time, so you got to sign up before then if it makes sense to you. That was essentially the pitch. But there was no visual. It was words on mind map notes that I was folding and unfolding and zooming in and zooming out on. It was not very pleasant, but done is better than better because the service was there. It was the sincerity that my audience knew that I was attempting to help them. And, what did I use for software? I used what one was the easiest for me to use. At the time, it was GoToWebinar. And I didn't build my own webpage or anything. I used whatever their internal registration system was. Yep. So I modified the least of the off-the-shelf components just to get it done. And then I didn't have a sales page. I literally just sent them to a PayPal checkout button, and they signed up that way. And that's what I did. And I did that for several webinars just so I could focus most of my efforts on the presentation aspect and not even on this on the communication portion of the presentation, not the visuals and not some of the other stuff. And then along the way, once that becomes unconsciously competent, as opposed to, you start off unconsciously incompetent. You don't even know you're bad. Then you learn you're bad. And then you say, okay, how do I get good? And then you get good, but it takes a lot of cognitive effort. And then eventually you wake up one day wondering how it was ever tough in the first place because it becomes automatic. And so you say, cool, now the effort that I used to put into that, I'm freed up to put into other things like visuals or put into other things like the funnel around it or put into other things like the technological aspect of it. But, win the fight against the white belt first and then work your way up until you can get to black belt territory. So, and it's all powered by service. So if the communication is simply like, these are the 7 things that hold you back when you're trying to accomplish X. set thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever you feel comfortable with to communicate those 7 things on the webinar, then do that. And then the presentation can be super formulaic. It can just be like, here's what it is, here's what it does, here's where you go to get it, here's the limitation that's applied to it, so that way you can make a decision sooner rather than later. Here's the risk you take. And that could literally be your first pitch. And if you're not doing a direct call to action, it's, hey, listen, if you want to talk about this more, here's where you go to book a time for you and I to get on a phone together to see if it makes sense or not. And then that could be your that could be your close.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's very actionable. I think it should be very non-intimidating for those of us who are like, I've never done this before. How
it's still going to be scary. Like you're doing 2 things that people hate: public speaking and selling.
Right. Yeah.
It's gonna be.
But really, you framed it.
Yeah.
You framed it really well in saying, like, you are helping people, right? If you can have that mindset where you really believe in what you offer and how you help people with video, if you can get clear on that and really understand that this is a service that can help a business make more money, save time, make a bigger impact, when you can start embracing that, it's like, shoot, I got to start teaching people this stuff like now, because whether or not they hire me, it is going to help them. So I think, yes,
that's right.
Selling, we hate that, or that feeling of, a feeling that's associated with that, where it's something that somebody doesn't want. But if you really are showing up to serve and to help, then selling is helping in that context.
Yeah,
we're almost out of time.
And I know we're wrapping, Ryan, but I just want to share one thing that I think will be helpful.
Yeah, please.
The way I think about it is this: every moment I'm not helping somebody, I'm contributing to their demise if they're the right client, right? Wow. So that person not having your video package for the next 6 months, how much damage is that going to cause to their business?
Yeah.
I mean, how much were they going to lose, and how much more pain will they continue to be in? And so if I'm not actively trying to help them mitigate that pain, I'm essentially contributing to that pain. That's how I think about it. Wow. And then something becomes more comfortable to me, because I could do nothing, not get paid, and watch them continue to suffer, or I could do something, get paid, and help alleviate the suffering. So that's what I'd like to leave everybody here today with.
Love that. So last big question. Let's see how concise you can answer here so we end on time. I'm starting with no list, right? I've got my creative director friend who's giving me some direction. I've got this webinar. Now, how do I get some people in the manufacturing space to come join my webinar?
Yeah, you say, here's the reason I'm doing this. I'm brand new. I don't have any clients. I need to make a reputation for myself. So I am going to do the most for you, and I'm going to ask the least amount of money in return so I can build that reputation. Nobody's going to care more for you than I will, and I need your endorsement. So when I do an unbelievably great job for you, I expect you'll tell other people about it, and I can reference you as a case study to really build my business down the line. So because of the situation I find myself in, I'm going to do a presentation for you that's going to be more valuable than what you're used to seeing, because I need you. And so that's how I'm going to approach it. And that will get buy-in. So every position you have is an advantage. So if you're in the game for a while, you're tried and true, you're dependable, but you're also old and crusty, right? If you're new, you're risky and inexperienced, but you're also hungry and willing to do the things they won't do. So take your position and communicate it as effectively as possible, and you'll win.
That's really good. Jason, this has been so fun, man. Seriously, I'm like, we're getting off this call. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start making my outline. I'm doing a webinar because I've got the reps, but I have yet to do that for our target audience. So I'm definitely going to do it. How can people connect with you, follow along with all the great things that you're up to?
Yeah, so get the book. It's called One to Many. It's on Amazon. Buy that book, and it outlines exactly the process I take step by step for creating webinars in it.
Amazing. This has been great. Seriously, thank you for showing up and bringing the heat. Really, really good, really practical. I'm excited to get this one out to the tribe and get some feedback from them as well. But thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome.
My friend, thank you so much for joining me today. Really pleasure having you. If you have something that you're taking away from this episode, I would love to hear what that is. You can leave a comment. If you're watching this video, you can shoot me an email. My email is ryan@studiosherpas.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you think somebody else might get something out of it, would you share it with them? I would love for you to do that. That would be amazing. You could take a screen grab of, if you're listening on your phone and just text it to somebody else and say, hey, you should listen to this. I would really, really appreciate that. And if you haven't downloaded the AI resources document, make sure you do that. studiosherpas.com/AI. I'm trying to take the busyness or the busy work out for you and provide you with something that I've asked our community, hey, what apps are you guys using? And then, hey, these are the apps that Ryan and his team are using to speed up their workflow. So again, get access to that, studiosherpas.com/AI. And I think that's it. I hope you have an amazing week, and I hope that you make today great, because you can and you will. That's all I've got for now. I'll see you on next week's episode. Bye for now.